We spend a lot of time talking about whether something looks good and almost no time talking about if it actually feels good or if it even functions for the people using it. It's time to put ethics back into aesthetic. But what do I mean by that? Well, when we focus solely on how things look, we're not addressing the elephant in the room, even if that room is exquisitely decorated. In fact, the more we dive deeper into this, more elephants start appearing. For example, by focusing solely on visual aesthetics, sure, an attractive design could get you on the cover of Architectural Digest or get you a viral Instagram reel. But if we focus just on that, we're ignoring if the space is actually useful. Does it actually support you in everyday life? Can you relax in it? Can you truly feel comfortable? Can it handle a bit of mess and unpredictability? Or does it low-key leave you on edge, and that it's almost like a performance because it only works if everything stays absolutely perfect? And that's exactly what these glossy snapshots or videos just can't capture. The movement of the everyday. Your kids running around, your pets shedding all over the couch, or those days that you just cannot get up to wash the dishes because your ADHD, anxiety, chronic illness is just making it impossible. And then that takes us to that deeper level. Whose ideas of good design are we celebrating and using anyway? Take urban planning, for example. Most cities historically have been built and designed by men, and it's just generally assumed that the design is neutral and it works for everybody. But because of the lack of diverse thought that went into it, cities actually favour the typical male patterns of movement and work, i.e. going straight from home to the office and from the office back home again. Whereas women, overall, of course not everyone, there's nuance here, women are more likely to make multi-stop journeys, dropping the kid off at school, having to pick up groceries, caring for elder parents, essentially having to coordinate this unpaid labour as well as their paid work. But public transport and road system primarily optimized for that direct, linear commuter journey. So really, what gets called neutral design is mostly someone else's experience being assumed as universal and then being treated as such. And it's usually the experience of the most powerful, the decision makers, and that leads to the most disadvantaged becoming more disadvantaged. All while being told, what are you talking about? It's not that deep. Design is never neutral. Now, of course, in many amazing ways, it's used for good, to help people thrive, to support well-being and dignity, to allow for comfort and rest, but also joy and community. But of course, it can also be used in ways that are harmful, to make life harder than it needs to be, or increasing isolation due to lack of inclusivity or accessibility. And sometimes that happens unintentionally, but sometimes it's very deliberate. And that's whether we're talking about urban planning, architecture, interior design, or just any form of design at all, really. But let's take a step back, and I'll give you some context as to how did I even get to noticing or questioning these things anyway. Growing up, I became aware of inequality very early on. My twin brother was autistic and he had learning difficulties, and he was mostly non-verbal, but he had the most incredible smile and cheeky personality, and I'm not just saying this, he genuinely melted the hearts of everybody that was lucky enough to know him. But being out in public was a very different experience. I'm not kidding. Every single day there were stares, dirty looks. There were often comments from adults like, can't you get him to shut up? Or what the fuck is wrong with him? And I got it from other kids too. And while that hurt, I could almost understand it a bit more. I could never understand how grown adults could be so close-minded and just cruel. And on top of that, I watched my parents constantly have to fight support that he not only deserved, but was entitled to. Sadly, my twin brother passed away just after our 12th birthday. It was actually the anniversary earlier this week. Of course, I miss him so much. Though I like to think that part of the reason that I care so much about this work is, in a way, because a part of him is always with me, fighting for a world that's more welcome, more humane, and more fair for everybody. And at the same time as all of this going on, I always loved design. As a kid, I was constantly rearranging my bedroom, moving furniture, imagining new layouts, and experimenting with how simple changes to a space could completely change the vibe of it. And I've always loved watching interior design shows, and anytime I walk down a paint sample aisle in a store, it's always brought me so much joy just thinking about all the possibilities of what could be created. And also as a kid, I wondered why the heck they've got 70 shades of white and why adults were so boring with their colour choices, but that's another video. And then by the end of high school, I'd even applied for art school to get a degree in fashion design. But between my life at the time, with my part-time job at a fairly upmarket retail store, and of course watching The Devil Wears Prada, I remember realizing quite quickly actually, I did not want to spend my career in toxic environment that felt harsh or competitive or cutthroat and often focused on the wrong things, in my opinion, i.e. not on how people actually felt in their clothing. Instead, I went on to get a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in criminal justice, and I had such a desire to really learn and understand why bad things were happening so then I could understand how to fix them. And I know that's giving like pageant girl, oh, my wishes for world peace vibes, but that's genuinely what I was feeling. I still do, by the way. And I was then blessed to receive a Fulbright scholarship for a criminology PhD over in the US, where I spent 5 incredible years and met the most amazing people. But long story short, maybe this will be another video, after several years, I had to leave my program due to, ironically, a toxic work environment that led to severe burnout and absolutely decimated my mental health, self-esteem, and nervous system. But let's focus on the positives from this experience. Design re-entered my life in a more central way. I realized the true, genuine importance and necessity of supportive spaces and environments. And as much as I'd always had this fun, superficial love for design, that design is not merely decoration, but rather something deeply tied to social justice. And it hit me that I could merge my passion for both of these into one. And alas, Haven on Earth, this social media channel was born. So this is where I want to explore design in all its forms through that lens of well-being, justice, inclusivity, and dignity. And I'll be talking about the psychology and the sociology of design, how spaces affect us emotionally and physically, and how we can design environments that don't just look good, but actually feel good. So if you've ever felt that something about design or environments or your spaces just didn't quite feel right, but you weren't sure why, this space is for you. If you want to come with me to peel back the layers to understand what's really going on under the surface, this space is for you. And if you're simply curious about what design could be or what any of this even means, this absolutely is a space for you. And I promise that I'll do my best to approach these topics with curiosity and care, but most importantly, without draining the joy out of it and being boring AF. So if you want to join me in exploring design through this lens, I'd absolutely love it if you subscribed and joined the conversation. And feel free to share if anything resonated with you here or anything you'd like me to talk about next. Until then, I hope you feel at home wherever you are.